The cold void of space stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by distant stars that looked like tiny diamonds scattered across black cloth. In this empty region between star systems, something drifted alone and silent. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of the Calaxian dreadnought Sovereign's Fist, his forearms crossed behind his back as he studied the tactical display. His blue skin gleamed under the bridge lights, and his large black eyes reflected the glow of the screens around him. The massive warship cut through space like a knife, its dark hull bristling with weapons that could destroy entire cities. "Commander," called out Lieutenant Vextall from the sensor station, "we have detected an unknown object in Sector 77 Alpha." Zethkar turned his head, his neck making a slight clicking sound. "What kind of object?" "It appears to be a derelict vessel. Sir, no energy signatures detected, no movement, it's just floating." "Distance?" 12,000 kilometers and closing, sir." Zethkar moved to the sensor station with quick, precise steps. His clawed feet made soft tapping sounds on the metal floor. The Calaxian Empire had been expanding for decades, crushing every species that stood in their way. Dead ships were common sights in conquered space. "Put it on the main screen," he ordered. The forward view screen flickered, and then showed the object. It was clearly a warship, but unlike anything in the Calaxian fleet. The hull was long and narrow, painted in faded gray and blue colors. Strange symbols were visible on its side, though they were hard to read from this distance. "Analysis?" Zethkar asked. Lieutenant Vextall worked at his console for several moments. "The design matches records of human vessels, sir. Based on the configuration, it appears to be one of their battle cruisers from approximately 100 years ago." Humans. Zethkar made a sound that was like a laugh mixed with a growl. Their ships were always poorly made. This one probably broke down and was left to drift. The humans had tried to expand into Calaxian space once before, many decades ago. Their small fleet had been easily defeated, and they had retreated back to their home system like frightened animals. Since then, they had stayed hidden in their corner of the galaxy while the Calaxian Empire grew stronger. "Are there any life signs?" Zethkar asked. "None detected, sir. The ship appears to be completely dead. No power, no heat, no movement. Weapons? The ship has weapon ports, but all systems appear to be offline. It poses no threat." Zethkar studied the image on the screen. The human ship looked like a ghost floating in the darkness. Its hull was covered with patches of different metals, as if someone had tried to repair damage using whatever materials they could find. Some sections looked newer than others, suggesting repairs had been made over many years. "Sir," another officer called out. "Should we investigate the vessel?" "No," Zethkar replied quickly. "It's just space junk. Log the coordinates and mark it as debris in our records. We have more important duties than studying human garbage." The bridge crew nodded and returned to their work. Within minutes, the Sovereign's Fist had passed the derelict ship and continued on its patrol route. The human vessel was left behind, growing smaller until it disappeared from their sensors. But the ship was not as dead as it appeared. Deep inside the USS Dakota, in a section of the ship that no longer showed on any external scans, something stirred. Banks of computers hummed quietly, their lights blinking in steady patterns. The ship's artificial intelligence, which the crew had nicknamed Liberty, had been awake and watching for over a century. Liberty had detected the Calaxian warship long before it had detected the Dakota. The AI had immediately shut down all external systems, making the ship appear dead and lifeless. It was a trick that had worked many times over the past 100 years. In the ship's core, protected by layers of shielding and hidden behind false bulkheads, 200 humans floated in cryogenic pods. Their bodies were frozen in time, kept alive by systems that Liberty had carefully maintained and improved over the decades. Captain Jake Morrison lay in the central pod, his face peaceful in the artificial sleep. His dark hair had grown long during the years in stasis, and his strong features looked younger than his 45 years. Around him, his crew slept on, unaware that their ship had just been dismissed as worthless by an alien empire. Liberty's sensors watched the Calaxian ship move away. The AI had learned much about the aliens over the years, studying their ships, whenever they passed through this region. The Calaxians were proud and arrogant. They believed their technology was superior to all others. This made them predictable. The AI turned its attention back to the ship's systems. Over the past century, Liberty had collected debris from dozens of destroyed vessels that had drifted through this area. Pieces of alien technology, rare metals, and advanced components had all been quietly gathered and studied. The Dakota no longer looked like the ship that had left Earth over 100 years ago. Liberty had rebuilt entire sections using salvaged materials. The fusion reactors had been upgraded with alien power cores. The weapon systems had been modified with technology from a dozen different species. The ship's hull had been reinforced with metals that were stronger than anything humans had ever created. But all of these improvements were hidden beneath a layer of false plating that made the ship look old and damaged. To any external observer, the Dakota appeared to be a derelict vessel that had been drifting for decades. Liberty processed the data it had gathered from the Calaxian ship. The aliens' technology was impressive, but it had weaknesses. Their ships relied heavily on centralized computer systems. Their weapons were powerful but slow to target. Their shields were strong but used enormous amounts of power. The AI filed this information away with everything else it had learned over the years. Someday, this knowledge might be useful. Meanwhile, far away in the Sol system, Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the command center on Earth's moon. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many battles. The walls around her were covered with displays showing the positions of Earth's small defense fleet. "Ma'am," said Colonel Pete Barnes, her aide, "we're receiving reports of increased Calaxian activity in the outer systems." "What kind of activity?" Carter asked. "Fleet movements, large ones. Intelligence suggests they're massing for another expansion wave." Carter nodded grimly. She had expected this day would come. The Calaxian Empire had been growing stronger for decades while humanity remained trapped in their home system. Earth's fleet was modern and well-trained, but it was small. They had perhaps 200 ships that could fight, while the Calaxians had thousands. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Unknown, ma'am, but based on their previous patterns, probably not long." Carter looked at the tactical display showing Earth's defenses. It would not be enough. She knew it, and everyone in the command center knew it. When the Calaxians came, humanity would fight with everything they had, but the outcome was already decided. In the empty space between the stars, the USS Dakota continued its silent drift. Its crew slept on, unaware that their species was facing extinction, and Liberty watched and waited, learning and preparing for a day that might never come. The Calaxian Empire grew stronger each day, crushing every species that opposed them. They had ignored the old human warship floating in the void, dismissing it as harmless debris. It was a mistake they would live to regret. 3 months had passed since the Calaxian warship had dismissed the drifting human vessel as space junk. In that time, the galaxy had become a much darker place. The Threx Republic was the first to fall. Their reptilian warships, sleek and fast, had fought bravely for 6 days before the last of their worlds went silent. The crystalline beings of the Vorton Collective lasted only 3 days. Their beautiful cities of living crystal were shattered by Calaxian bombardments, leaving nothing but glittering dust floating in space. Emperor Zaltheron sat on his throne aboard the massive command ship Eternal Dominion, watching reports of victory after victory. His scaled face showed satisfaction as he studied the tactical displays. Soon, only the pathetic humans would remain, cowering in their tiny corner of the galaxy. "The outer systems are secured, my lord," reported General Krathven, bowing his four-armed form before the throne. "All resistance has been crushed." "Good," the Emperor hissed through his sharp teeth. "Begin preparations for the final assault. I want the human homeworld taken within the month." Meanwhile, in the cold void where the USS Dakota drifted, Liberty had been monitoring the Calaxian communications. The AI's sensors had detected the massive fleet movements and the destruction of entire worlds. The artificial intelligence processed this information with growing concern. The time for hiding was over. Liberty began the awakening sequence. Deep within the ship's core, warming systems activated in the cryogenic bay. The process was slow and careful. After a century in stasis, the human bodies needed time to adjust. Too fast and the crew would die. Too slow, and they might never wake up at all. Captain Jake Morrison was the first to open his eyes. The lid of his cryopod lifted with a soft hiss and warm air flowed over his face. His throat felt dry as sand, and his muscles ached like he had run a marathon. But he was alive. "Welcome back, Captain." Liberty's voice came from speakers around the bay. The AI's tone was calm and professional, just as Morrison remembered. "How long?" Morrison asked, his voice rough and cracked. 103 years, 7 months, and 12 days. Morrison tried to sit up, but his muscles felt weak. Liberty had warned him this would happen. The human body was not designed for such long periods in stasis. "Status report," he managed to say. "The Galaxian Empire has expanded significantly. They have conquered most of the known galaxy. Earth remains, but intelligence suggests they are preparing for a final assault." Around the bay, other cryopods were opening. Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez was the next to wake, followed by Dr. Ben Taylor and Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker. One by one, the crew of the Dakota returned to the world of the living. Amy Rodriguez was a small woman with dark hair and quick hands that seemed to understand machines better than most people understood other humans. She had designed many of the Dakota's original systems, and Liberty had worked closely with her modifications over the years. "Sweet Mother of Mercy," she whispered as she looked around the cryobay. "Liberty, what have you done to my ship?" "I have made improvements," the AI replied. "Many improvements." Dr. Ben Taylor, the ship's medical officer, was already checking on the crew members who were still waking up. He was a tall, thin man with gentle hands and a mind that could solve medical problems others thought impossible. His first concern was always for the crew's health. "Everyone seems stable," he reported to Morrison. "But we'll need time to fully recover from the extended stasis." Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker was the ship's tactical officer, a broad-shouldered man who understood weapons and warfare better than anyone Morrison had ever met. He was studying the displays around the cryobay with growing amazement. "Captain," Parker said slowly, "these readouts, they're showing systems I don't recognize." "Liberty has been busy," Morrison replied, finally managing to stand on unsteady legs. "Show us what you've done, old friend." Liberty guided the awakening crew through the ship, and what they saw amazed them. The corridors looked the same, but sensors showed that the hull had been completely rebuilt. The fusion reactors hummed with power from alien technology. Weapon systems had been upgraded with components from a dozen different species. In the engineering section, Amy Rodriguez stared in wonder at displays showing power levels she had never dreamed possible. "Liberty, how did you manage all this?" "I collected salvage over the years," the AI explained. "Debris from destroyed ships, rare metals from asteroid impacts, technology from vessels that passed through this region. I studied everything and incorporated the best designs into our systems." "Our weapons?" Parker asked. "Significantly enhanced. I have combined human engineering with alien technology in ways that should surprise our enemies." Morrison felt a mixture of pride and sadness. Pride in what Liberty had accomplished, sadness at the cost. His ship had become something new, something powerful, but it had taken over a century of isolation to achieve. "What's our tactical situation?" he asked. Liberty activated the main display, showing star charts of the local galaxy. Red markers indicated Galaxian-controlled systems. There were hundreds of them spreading like a disease across the stars. Only a small blue dot marked Earth's location. "The Galaxian Empire now controls approximately 70% of the known galaxy," Liberty reported. "Their military strength is estimated at over 50,000 warships of various classes." "And Earth's defenses?" "Approximately 200. Ships, mostly light cruisers and destroyers." The bridge fell silent. The numbers were impossible. Even with Liberty's improvements, one ship could not stand against an empire. Dr. Taylor was the first to speak. "Maybe we should try to contact Earth, warn them what's coming." "No," Morrison said firmly. "If we break radio silence, the Galaxians will detect us. Our only advantage is that they think we're dead." "So what do we do?" Rodriguez asked. Morrison studied the star chart for a long moment. We learn everything we can about our enemy, their ships, their tactics, their weaknesses. Liberty? How long? Before the Calaxians attack Earth? Based on their fleet movements, approximately 6 months. Then we have 6 months to become the weapon that can save our people. Over the following weeks, the crew of the Dakota worked to understand their transformed ship. Rodriguez and her engineering team learned to operate systems that combined human and alien technology in ways that should have been impossible. Parker studied the new weapons, finding capabilities that amazed him. Taylor worked to keep the crew healthy as they recovered from their long sleep. Morrison spent his time with Liberty, learning everything the AI had discovered about the Calaxian Empire. Their ships were powerful, but followed predictable patterns. Their commanders were arrogant, believing themselves superior to all other species. Most importantly, their entire fleet operated through a centralized communication network. If we could disrupt their communications, Morrison mused, their coordination would collapse. I have been working on that problem, Liberty replied. I believe I have a solution, but it would require getting very close to their command ships. How close? Close enough to touch. Morrison smiled grimly. It was a suicide mission, but it might be the only chance humanity had. As the Dakota continued its silent drift through space, its crew prepared for war. They were 200 humans, on one ship, facing an empire of thousands of worlds. The odds were impossible, but they had something the Calaxians had never encountered. They had human stubbornness, and they had nothing left to lose. 6 months had passed since Captain Morrison and his crew had awakened from their century-long sleep. The USS Dakota no longer drifted aimlessly through space. Instead, it moved like a hunter stalking its prey, following Calaxian supply routes, and watching their fleet movements from the shadows. The Calaxian Empire had grown fat and lazy on its victories. Emperor Zal-Theran had declared the Great Cleansing nearly complete, with only the weak humans remaining to be swept away. His massive fleet spread across conquered space, strip mining planets and enslaving the survivors of dozens of species. Commander Zethkar now served aboard the Emperor's flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He stood in the command center, watching preparations for the final assault on Earth. Around him, thousands of Calaxian officers coordinated the movements of their vast armada. The fleet assembly is proceeding on schedule, reported Admiral Vorthak, the Emperor's chief military advisor. We will have 12,000 ships ready for the attack on the human homeworld. 12,000, Zethkar repeated with satisfaction. The humans have 200 ships? This will be over in hours. What none of them knew was that the Dakota was less than a light year away, hidden behind a dead moon and listening to every word they said. Communications Officer Kate Williams sat at her station, her headphones covering her ears as she monitored Calaxian transmissions. She was a young woman with bright eyes and quick fingers that danced across her control panel like a pianist playing a complex song. Captain, she said softly, I'm picking up encrypted communications from the Calaxian command ship. They're coordinating the final attack on Earth. Morrison nodded from his captain's chair. Over the past months, his crew had learned things about the Calaxian Empire that would have amazed their enemies. They had followed supply ships, recorded battle tactics, and studied the alien technology up close. What's our status, Amy? Morrison asked. Chief Engineer Rodriguez looked up from her console. Her face was smudged with grease, and her hands were covered in the strange alien metals that now formed part of their ship's systems. All modifications are complete, Captain. We're as ready as we'll ever be. The Dakota had been transformed into something that no Calaxian would recognize. The ship's hull still looked old and damaged from the outside, but inside it was a marvel of combined human and alien engineering. Rodriguez had spent months installing new weapon systems that used technology from the Vorthon Collective, the Threx Republic, and a dozen other conquered species. The plasma cannons are operating at 150% of their original capacity, she continued. The new targeting systems from the Threx ships are incredibly accurate, and the quantum disruption torpedo is ready for deployment. The quantum disruption torpedo was their secret weapon. Rodriguez and Liberty had designed it using principles from Vorthon quantum technology and Threx communication systems. It wouldn't destroy a ship with explosives. Instead, it would cut through the quantum communication networks that connected the entire Calaxian fleet. Lieutenant Commander Parker had been studying Calaxian battle tactics for months. Their entire fleet operates like one giant organism, he explained to Morrison. Every ship is connected to every other ship through quantum communications. Orders come from the command ship and spread through the fleet instantly. What happens if we cut those communications? Morrison asked. Chaos, Parker replied with a grim smile. 12,000 ships suddenly become 12,000 individual units with no way to coordinate. They'll be fighting blind. Dr. Taylor had been treating the crew for the effects of their long sleep. But he had also been studying Calaxian biology from captured medical records. Their psychology is interesting, he told Morrison. They're pack hunters by nature. They rely on group coordination. Individual Calaxians are actually quite timid when separated from their groups. Morrison absorbed all this information as he planned their attack. One ship against 12,000 seemed impossible, but humans had always been good at finding ways to win impossible battles. Kate, he said to the communications officer, what's the status of Earth's defenses? Williams adjusted her headphones and listened to the weak signals coming from the Sol system. Admiral Carter has assembled everything Earth can spare. 200 ships, including some old cargo vessels that have been fitted with weapons. She's positioning them in a defensive formation around Earth and Mars. Morrison felt a stab of sadness. Lisa Carter had been a friend before the Dakota had left on its mission over a century ago. Now she was preparing to fight a hopeless battle against overwhelming odds. They won't last an hour against 12,000 Calaxian ships, Parker said, quietly. No, Morrison agreed. But they won't have to. We're going to give them something else to worry about. The plan was simple and completely insane. The Dakota would wait until the Calaxian fleet was fully engaged with Earth's defenses. Then, they would make a direct attack on the Emperor's flagship, using their speed and stealth to get close enough to fire the quantum disruption torpedo. The hard part will be staying alive long enough to reach the command ship, Rodriguez said. Even with all our improvements, we're still just one ship. That's why we're not going to fight like one ship, Morrison replied. We're going to fight like ghosts. Liberty had been studying Calaxian sensor technology for months. The AI had discovered that their sensors were designed to track large formations of ships, not individual vessels operating alone. A single ship, especially one using stealth technology borrowed from the Threx, could slip through their formations almost undetected. We'll use the confusion of the main battle to mask our approach, Morrison explained. By the time they realize we're there, it will be too late. The crew spent their final weeks preparing for the mission. Everyone knew the odds. Even if they succeeded in disrupting the Calaxian communications, the Dakota would probably be destroyed in the process. But they also knew that failure meant the end of humanity. Dr. Taylor made sure everyone was in peak physical condition. Rodriguez fine-tuned every system until the ship ran like a perfect machine. Parker drilled the crew on combat procedures until they could fight in their sleep. Williams practiced intercepting and jamming Calaxian communications. As the day of the attack approached, Morrison found himself thinking about Earth. He had been born there over a century ago, in a time when humans still believed they were alone in the universe. Now Earth was the last free human world, and its fate rested in the hands of 200 people on a ship that the galaxy had forgotten. Captain, Liberty said one day as Morrison sat alone on the bridge, I have been calculating our chances of success, and the mathematics are not encouraging. Morrison smiled. Liberty, in all the years I've known you, have humans ever let mathematics stop them from doing what they thought was right? No, Captain, they have not. Then let's go save our world. The Dakota began its final approach toward the Calaxian fleet. In the distance, Earth's blue marble hung in space, surrounded by the small formation of human ships that would soon face the Empire's wrath. Morrison watched through the viewscreen as his home grew larger, knowing that this might be the last time he would ever see it. But he also knew that sometimes one ship could change the course of history. Sometimes the galaxy's greatest empires fell not to massive armies, but to a few people who refused to give up. The Calaxians had ignored the warship until now. Soon they would learn the cost of that mistake. The Calaxian armada arrived at the Sol system like a swarm of metal locusts blocking out the stars. 12,000 warships of every size and class formed battle lines that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. At their center, the massive command ship Eternal Dominion hung like a dark moon, bristling with enough weapons to crack planets. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the Lunar Command Center, watching the impossible sight through the reinforced windows. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight knot, and her weathered face showed no emotion. But inside, her heart was breaking. In 40 years of military service, she had never seen odds like these. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said Colonel Pete Barnes, though his voice shook slightly. Carter nodded and activated the fleet communication system. "This is Admiral Carter to all Earth Defense Force vessels. Today we fight not just for our world but for our species. Make every shot count, Carter out." Earth's tiny fleet of 200 ships spread out in a defensive formation. Old cargo ships fitted with missile pods flew alongside modern destroyers. Civilian volunteers crewed, vessels that had been built for mining asteroids, not fighting wars. They all knew they were about to die, but not one ship turned away. Emperor Zaltheron watched from his throne aboard the Eternal Dominion as his fleet prepared to attack. His scaled lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Begin the assault," he commanded. The first wave of Calaxian ships surged forward like a tide of destruction. Their plasma cannons lit up the darkness with beams of deadly energy. Earth's ships met them with desperate courage, their smaller weapons spitting fire at the advancing enemy. The battle was over almost before it began. Within minutes, half of Earth's fleet was burning wreckage drifting through space. The Calaxian ships pressed forward, their formations perfect and their coordination flawless. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. "The humans are fighting bravely," he admitted, "but this will be finished within the hour." That was when sensors detected something impossible. "Sir," called out a sensor technician, "I'm reading a single ship approaching from the outer system. It appears to be human." Zethkar frowned and looked at the display. A lone contact was moving through their rear formations at incredible speed, weaving between Calaxian ships like it was dancing. "One ship?" he said with disbelief. "What kind of fools would send one ship against our entire fleet?" The USS Dakota streaked through the Calaxian formations like a ghost made of metal and fire. Captain Morrison sat in his command chair watching the tactical display as his ship slipped between enemy vessels that were 10 times its size. "Stealth systems holding," reported Kate Williams from her communication station. "They can see us, but their targeting computers can't get a lock." "Engines at maximum power," added Amy Rodriguez from engineering. "Hull stress is approaching critical levels, but we're holding together." Lieutenant Commander Parker coordinated the ship's weapons as they carved a path through the enemy fleet. The Dakota's hybrid weapon systems tore into Calaxian ships with devastating effect. Plasma cannons powered by alien energy cores punched through shields that should have been impenetrable. Kinetic railguns using Threx targeting systems struck with impossible accuracy. But Morrison wasn't interested in fighting the entire fleet. He had one target and it was getting closer with every passing second. "There," he said, pointing at the massive shape of the Eternal Dominion on the view screen. "That's our target." The Calaxian command ship was enormous, over 5 kilometers, long and bristling with enough weapons to destroy entire star systems. It sat at the center of the fleet like a spider in its web, coordinating the movements of thousands of ships through quantum communication networks. "Quantum disruption torpedo ready for launch," Rodriguez reported from engineering. "Range to target?" Morrison asked. 2,000 kilometers and closing," Parker replied. "We need to get within 500 kilometers for the torpedo to be effective." Around them, Calaxian ships were beginning to realize that the lone human vessel was more dangerous than they had thought. Enemy fire began to focus on the Dakota, forcing Morrison to weave through a maze of plasma beams and missile explosions. "Hull, breach on Deck 7, Dr. Taylor reported from his damage control station. I've got repair teams working on it. Keep us together, Doc, Morrison said grimly. We just need a few more minutes. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Emperor, Zaltharon was no longer smiling. The single human ship had destroyed over 30 of his vessels and was still advancing toward his flagship. All ships, he commanded, concentrate fire on that vessel. Destroy it immediately. Hundreds of Galaxian warships turned their weapons toward the Dakota. The space around the human ship exploded with enemy fire, but somehow Morrison kept his vessel moving. Rodriguez worked miracles in engineering, rerouting power around damaged systems and keeping the engines running even as the hull buckled under the strain. 1,000 kilometers, Parker announced. A massive explosion rocked the ship as a Galaxian plasma beam found its mark. The lights flickered, and smoke filled the bridge. We've lost the main power coupling, Rodriguez reported, her voice tight, with stress. I'm switching to backup power, but we won't last much longer. 800 kilometers. Parker continued his countdown. Another explosion, this one closer to the bridge. Morrison could hear the ship groaning under the punishment it was taking. But they were so close now. So very close. 600 kilometers. Torpedo tubes are ready, Rodriguez called out. Just give me the word, Captain. Morrison watched the massive Galaxian command ship growing larger on his view screen. He could see the weapon ports opening along its hull, preparing to destroy his tiny vessel with a single coordinated blast. 500 kilometers, Parker announced. Fire, Morrison ordered. The quantum disruption torpedo launched from the Dakota's forward tube, streaking across the remaining distance in seconds. It struck the Eternal Dominion's communications array and exploded in a burst of quantum energy that was invisible to the naked eye but devastating to electronic systems. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Every quantum communication link in the Galaxian fleet severed simultaneously. 12,000 warships that had been operating as a single coordinated force suddenly became 12,000 confused individual vessels with no way to talk to each other. The perfectly organized Galaxian formations dissolved into chaos. Ships that had been working together began firing on anything that moved, including each other. Without central coordination, the fleet became a mob of frightened predators attacking whatever was closest. Admiral Carter watched from the Lunar Command Center as the impossible happened. The Galaxian fleet, which had been methodically destroying Earth's defenses, suddenly turned on itself in a frenzy of confused violence. All ships, she commanded, press the attack. Hit them while they're confused. Earth's remaining vessels surged forward, their weapons blazing. What should have been humanity's final defeat became the Empire's greatest disaster. The Dakota, critically damaged and drifting, watched as the Galaxian fleet tore itself apart. Captain Morrison, wounded but conscious, smiled as he saw their mission succeed beyond their wildest hopes. Welcome home, USS Dakota. Admiral Carter's voice crackled over the communication system. Well done. Morrison closed his eyes as his ship was surrounded by Earth vessels coming to their rescue. They had done the impossible. One forgotten ship had brought down an empire that had seemed invincible. The crew that had slept for a century had finally awakened to save their world.